So I hope you enjoyed yourself yesterday and at the gala dinner. Yes? Okay, good. So we have a full day, lots of stuff to do today. We have actually 3 panels ahead of us and 1 keynote. So I hope you'll equally get to benefit from the sessions, and would like to start off. And starting us off today is basically an extension of yesterday's panel, which started off discussing the issue of terrestrial capacity from Cape Town to Cairo, whether can we actually send a packet terrestrially from Cape Town to Cairo? Is it a reality or still an illusion? After the discussion yesterday, we saw quite a number of the challenges that exist. Some of the areas most countries are facing, especially the landlocked countries. This morning, we would like to look at what opportunities actually exist for terrestrial, regional terrestrial carriers. And to discuss that, we have a panel of 3. To start with, we have Ben Roberts, who is the Chief Technical Officer at Liquid Telecom. We have Martin Levy, who needs no further introduction. And then we have Duncan Martin, who is the CEO of TENET and UbuntuNET. And CEO of UbuntuNET. Oh, just TENET. Okay. The CEO of TENET. And he runs the academic network here in South Africa, the research and education network here in South Africa. And we'll get a feel of what their experiences are with respect, or what they see the opportunities being in respect to terrestrial interconnection when it comes to carrier across the region. Now, to start off, I want to get Martin Levy here to talk to us with view of his last presentation yesterday, looking at the slides that he showed, the interconnection, the AS adjacencies. What does that mean from a carrier opportunity point of view? Martin Levy, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm not going to present any slides. I did that yesterday, and the slides have been uploaded by ISOC, which means that everything is available on the AfPIF website. But I'm just going to review just a couple of key points. One is, in the internet world, routing is everything. You can have a physical interconnect between one point and another. And as we discussed today, the physical side of being able to run fiber inside the continent, if you don't get both efficient and well-operating IP routing on that infrastructure, it'll all be for nothing. And by the way, there's an analogy even in the peering world. Turning up at a peering exchange and not being efficient in your peering can also have the same effect. You're not using the full value of an internet exchange. These things are important to understand, and it is why when you look at the world from the internet backbone point of view, yes, you like to see fiber maps, but the first thing you ask is, which ones are operational? Which ones are real? Which ones actually have traffic routing on them? And the amount of work that you put into that is where the real payoff is. So as we hear talks and we hear about both the physical aspects of running fiber, we talked yesterday about cross-border issues, both regulatory and practical. But as you look at this more and more, realize that it's all about turning up the IP. And of course, when I say IP, I mean V4 and V6, with the future in mind. The other subtle point is the rest of the world. however you look at connectivity as it stands today that may go through the east or go through the west on undersea cables, and the large amount of latency before you get to Europe as the first stopping point, think about the type of builds that can reduce the latency, improve the way TCP works. Now, you're never going to change the speed of light, and you're never going to change the physical position of countries. Graham had this nice quote about continental drift. Maybe not in our lifetime would be the good response to that. But the reality is that as you look at more and more ability to reduce latency out to the rest of the world, potentially with terrestrial cables, potentially, of course, think about the realization that getting efficient routing and using them at the IP level is just as important. More internet exchanges, more localizing of traffic, obviously the potential of bringing in caches from various players is just as important. But today, talking about the terrestrial side of things, think about where you can swap traffic as you move it around the continent and improve it. Take a page out of Europe's book. If you look at Europe, and you have to go back 15 years, which is very cool, and looking at all the traffic that would fly off to London, from London or from Amsterdam or Germany, and went all the way over to the US and back again, and slowly but surely the building of European backbones and crossing the borders, which was much easier. We know that. There's no question about that. But you look now at a very, very mature multi-city internet exchange marketplace and a very, very mature telecom space where, to make a comment about yesterday's panel and reiterate it, as an operator in the US and in Europe, when we buy services from one city to another, we just don't care which country they're in. There is no concept that either pricing or delivery is different if I order a circuit from Amsterdam in the Netherlands to Germany in, let's say, Frankfurt, obviously, being the most appropriate place. We just order it as if it's Amsterdam to Frankfurt. There is no border. This is partly a process that comes out of the maturity of the telecoms. It comes out of the existence of the European Commission and normalization of currency, of taxing, etc. But even so, as we go and order circuits outside the European Commission, or we look at going at different distances, we still have this very laissez-faire approach to ordering. The country part disappears. That may be a step, or second step, or third step within inside this marketplace, but it's nothing wrong with having a goal. And reducing some of the points that we talked about yesterday between countries would actually be a big win. But my final point is, don't forget to enable the IP routing when you're done with the physical side of it. And I'll hand the mic back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Now next, I'd like to invite Ben Roberts. Ben Roberts was with Liquid Telecom. Liquid Telecom have tried something which I thought was quite interesting for the peering forum to experience, in that in spite of all the challenges we've seen with cross-border and interconnection, they've actually managed to build an extensive network in Southern Africa. Now, for me, and what I like to hear, and I believe for the same will extend to most of the delegates here, is that how did you manage to do that, and what opportunities are you seeing going forward?
Did you have to activate the, see, I'm already active.
Yeah,
They told me to leave it on.
Okay, so we, just a bit of background to where we've come from. We were traditionally a satellite company. and we're based in UK with some satellite earth stations there. And we're part of ECONET, which is a group of mobile GSM networks. They've got the largest GSM network in Zimbabwe and some other shareholdings and networks in Burundi and Botswana and Nigeria. And we were doing that for quite a while, and it became clear really that, particularly in Zimbabwe, that the needs of the data for the GSM network, the 3G rollout, was going to exceed the amount of demand that we could deliver on satellite. Just there wasn't enough satellites going up. And it also became clear that there were sea cables coming to East Africa. Seacom was pretty nearly finished, and at the time there was obviously consortiums like EASY, which were being talked about, and didn't seem to be going anywhere. So what we wanted to avoid was a situation where Zimbabwe would be left in the dark, just buying expensive IP transit from South Africa, which was pretty expensive at the time, and it wouldn't be able to roll out the 3G networks that were in Zimbabwe. So pretty much the concept for the network was designed initially around the needs of the GSM network in Zimbabwe. So we didn't just take a single route out to the sea just to get to a landing station. We've got a fairly extensive transmission network in Zimbabwe. So it's rings of all around the country, going off to different towns and cities, covering pretty much all of the whole area where the people are, and obviously where the GSM base station masts and all that stuff are. So from that, I guess the layout of the network really flows from the available routes that you've got, where you've got roads, railways, in lakes, rivers, that sort of thing, and border crossings that are available to you. So you can't dig fibre across miles and miles of desert or bush. You have to follow the routes that are there. And there's a lot of talk here about the cross-border challenge. For us, it was, I don't know, it was a challenge, but we took the approach of having a license on both sides, so a full license required on both sides. So we already had a full license in Zimbabwe to do this kind of thing, and we had a license in South Africa. So the only thing that really changed was, I think, the regulator in Zimbabwe softened and gave us permission to cross the border into South Africa, which is the first time that had been done. And that was the starting point for the project. And from there it developed. You have to get a lot of permissions before you start building a fibre network, and roads, landowners, all the people that you're going to interfere with when you're digging your fibre. So, so the cross-border challenges really are, you have a lot of permissions to get with borders. There's a lot of people involved in border crossings, and there's good reasons for that. Some borders are still conflict zones in the world, and historically they have to be looked after by a number of authorities. So, as I said, in the main, regulators are fine. Regulators, their role is to increase the development of IT in the country, IT and telephony in the country, and all you need to do with regulators is to show them a business case or how it's going to benefit the country they're in. And that's a fairly easy, if you do it right and it is a good case, it should be fairly easy to convince a good regulator to do that. And what becomes more difficult is the other authorities. You have, obviously, Customs and Excise. They look after border posts. But they can be convinced as well. They can see the benefits for the country of revenue coming in, taxes, and also the connectivity for their border posts, because they're all wanting to upgrade their border post software at the moment, things like that. They're needing high-speed connectivity so they can check people in and out with passports and also goods and services. So they're okay. Then you've got other people like a lot of the borders are rivers, obviously, in a lot of Africa. So you've got the big rivers which you have to cross to get over borders. So you've got water authority. You need water authority licenses. You might need the owners of the bridge. So a bridge might well be owned by a private company. So you need permission from the owners of the bridge. As well, you obviously got lots of wildlife in Africa. So you might have national parks where you've got wildlife zones. And also the roads operators and the rail operators themselves. And in fact, The thing that's, in building this network, the thing that's been hardest to gain was actually permissions to use the roads in South Africa. In everywhere else, it's not really been a challenge, but we've only just started building fiber from Zimbabwe to Johannesburg, and that delay has been entirely down to getting permission to using roads in South Africa. So, yeah, and there's private landowners as well, and also heritage as well. So if you're crossing a bridge, you might find that that's actually been built 100 years ago. It's a historic monument, so you can't really go and send your contractors and smash the thing up. You've got to be quite nice to that bridge, and you've got to hide your fibre away where it's not going to be seen. So, and then the last point really is when you're crossing borders, you might need to get permission from the police or the army that would patrol the border, just to let your workers go and do the work with them there. Now, having done all that, the project part is really easy. It's fairly easy, really. I think Africa's quite good at this. I mean, I'm from UK, and the first time I came to Africa really to do a project, I went to Nigeria to build a satellite. It was a 6-metre satellite dish. So they showed me the site. It was a patch of grass, and they said, oh yeah, I said, how long to get it ready? They said, oh, we've got it in stores. It'll be ready in 3 weeks. And I said, no, don't be silly. That would take me 6 months in UK. And they had it ready in 3 weeks. And that's the point. I think in Africa, people make a plan, and stuff like that is easy to do. You've got like willing and available casual labour, you've got skills, and you've got everything needed to do these civil projects. So as I say, that really, although it's a lot of work, it's the easiest thing to do. You haven't got all the red tape of planning permission that you would have in Europe. And that's it, really. I mean, that's the fibre network. We have built all the way through Zimbabwe into Zambia. We're now at the border with DRC and intending to build to Lubumbashi in DRC, and then hopefully onwards to Kolwezi. There's other opportunities for fibre in the region, heading into Mozambique, Malawi, and even as far as Tanzania, in fact. Tanzania, it's already got a landing station. It's not such a good business case. And as Martin was saying, the IP routing is absolutely crucial. Having built a fibre network, you have to decide what you're going to do with it from an IP side. So I think what we've done is we've put on it a range of different services. So you can buy traditional legacy SDM1s or things like that, if that's what you want to do. But we also have internet or IP POPs in every major city that the fiber's touched down on. It's an MPLS architecture, and also IP transit and peering over that. And what that means is you've got the most efficient routing, fastest ping times between Lusaka and Zambia, with Lusaka and Harare, which you're going to get anywhere in the world. And we also have connected to all the internet exchanges that we've found along the way. So Johannesburg Internet Exchange is the one where we exchange most traffic, because that's where the profile is. But we're also on Zimbabwe Internet Exchange, which we've actually been members of for 10 years. But we've connected to Zambia Internet Exchange and also Botswana Internet Exchange. So that's really what we're doing, and that's how we've put the network together. And that's it.
Thank you very much. So finally, I'd like to invite Duncan Martin. The reason why we wanted to have the NREN in this panel is because there's been an ongoing strong effort by the UbuntuNET community to actually interconnect all the academic network research organizations in sub-Saharan Africa, if I got that right. And they've had a few challenges, but they've also managed to find a few solutions that are working. But by and large, there's a lot of opportunity I see that still needs to be captured and explored. And I hope Duncan Martin will let us know what they're trying to do. Welcome, Duncan.
Thank you. Now it's working. Good morning, all. Thank you for being here. As Ben was talking about an STM1 as a legacy notion, I was wondering whether an NREN is, he would regard an NREN as perhaps a legacy notion. I don't know. What do you say, Ben? Anyway, NRENs like STMs. Ethernet handles better, but we like layer 2. And we UbuntuNet will be knocking on Liquid's door, I do not doubt, in search of layer 2 point-to-points. And we'll do our own routing, thank you. Yeah. Are we up? Yes. I'm talking really with my UbuntuNet hat on. I'm a non-executive director of the UbuntuNet Alliance, one of the founding people, in fact, of the UbuntuNet Alliance, and it's among my chief passions. I have really had a lot of fun and enjoyment working with people in Africa to make the UbuntuNet Alliance mean something for its member NRENs, and for National Research and Education Networks, including my own TENET, of which I am the CEO. Oops, that went rather too fast. So UbuntuNet Alliance is the regional REN. You'll see the word REN a lot, Research and Education Network. It's the regional REN for Eastern and Southern Africa. There are 13 member NRENs, so the Alliance is a non-profit organization, and its members are these 13 NRENs. If you sort of aggregate, whoops, oh gosh, I thought that was a pointer. There we go. This is a pointer, I expect. Yeah. If you sort of just aggregate your eye across there, you'll see the membership region of the UbuntuNet Alliance. It's completely unpolitical. We don't define it as the union of SADC and EAC or anything like that. It's simply the membership region is no more and no less than a list of countries. And these countries are in the eastern and southern area. Our initial view was we would like to cover sub-Saharan Africa, but in conversation with our West African colleagues in Nigeria and Ghana and so on, we decided it'd be better to go separate ways and have sensible business-like interconnection agreements with the two, with them as well, when in the fullness of time. So these are the 13. Of the 13, only 5 have networks that are in their own countries that are in a position to receive any kind of services from the regional REN UbuntuNet. These are other regional research and education networks in Africa. There's ASREN, the Arab States Research and Education Network. That's not African only, it stretches across all the Arab states and so through into the Middle East, but as far west as Morocco. And then there's WACREN, West and Central African Research and Education Network. These are our West African colleagues that I spoke of earlier. WACREN is incorporated in Ghana as a non-profit entity. ASREN is incorporated in Jordan. So we the UbuntuNet Alliance, have meetings with these other counterparts, and we are agreed with them that in the fullness of time we will have business-like interconnection arrangements with them, and even sharing each other's facilities is being talked about now. This is the most famous regional research and education network in the world, probably. Internet 2 might dispute that. However, Géant, no one has matched the Europeans and Géant in the efforts and money that they have put in to connecting to the rest of the world, connecting to research and education networks elsewhere. Huge pipes to the west, huge pipes to the east. The Africans, I have to tell you, paid for these southbound pipes, southbound from the European viewpoint. So the UbuntuNet, the European Commission is only now, in a manner I'll tell you, a project called Africa Connect, starting to actually put some money into Europe's connections with Europe, and that's an amazingly valuable project. So Géant deserves an accolade from the entire research and education networking community worldwide for their focus and investment and support of research and education networking everywhere. UbuntuNet today, this is a diagram of the UbuntuNet network as it is today. You can see there's a hub in Mwangi, that's the landing station of SECOM on the east coast of South Africa. There's an UbuntuNet routing hub in Amsterdam, and there's the first UbuntuNet routing hub of all was in Telecity, London, using a router that Cisco Systems donated back in 2008. So that's when that started. This one is dated 2011, and this one about 2010. What you see in green here are submarine circuits. This one is a 10 gig. TENET owns a life of the cable IRU to an STM64 between Mwangi and at the moment it goes actually to London, But we have agreed with CECOM that over the next few months we will move the European termination to Amsterdam. I'd like to just give a word of thanks to CECOM. They had an amazing vision, I think, and understanding when in 2007, later part of 2007, my phone rang and they said, is that TENET? I said, yes. They said, we want to sell you at an amazing price an STM64 to London. And it was a very short and sweet negotiation. Suvir Ramdani, who's sitting there and whom you saw performing yesterday, he and I were the parties that negotiated this thing. And it really changed the landscape for us in South Africa and in Eastern Africa. This is a 5 gigabit per second rented circuit to STM16s that we've rented on a 12-month contract from Internet Solutions. Why a short term? Well, because we believe the South African government will be buying a long-term IRU on the wax cable, which will come into service within the 12 months. So we have this redundancy, and I'll show you how it builds on. These red blobs are the 5 NRENs, member NRENs of UbuntuNET, that actually get a service from UbuntuNET at the moment. So TENET, I've got a slide about each of them, so I won't tell you more about them then. But this is Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, Zambia, and South African TENET. Okay, here come 5 slides quickly about each of those 5. TENET, long-established Kenyan NREN, the CEO is here with us, Mioli Kashoda. The connections to UbuntuNET total more than 2 gigabits per second. There are the details. TENET, of course, has made serious use of the Teams cable to Fujairah from Mombasa, and so they have altogether 3 STM4s on Teams, and then from CECOM an STM1 into London. This into Amsterdam is not yet configured, but is about to be. So this is TENET as it will be within weeks. Peak aggregate inbound traffic is about 1.3 gigabits per second. Here's TERNET. Interestingly, TERNET first used the name TENET, but didn't make it known and didn't register it in any way. And so unknown to that, we started in South Africa, started talking TENET, and that became well known. So they very graciously agreed to stick an R in there. That's the Tanzanian NREN. It's not long established. It is working. It has an STM1 on CECOM to London from Dar es Salaam, and there is traffic flowing. The challenge facing the Tanzanians really is to get the universities collaborating. This is run by a research institute called COSTECH, and the universities have to make their own way, as it were, to COSTECH at this present time. So a struggle to really get going. MoreNet, one of the founding NRENs of UbuntuNET, also has an STM1 on CECOM into London. Peak aggregate traffic, I battled actually to get a good idea. Still in testing phase. This STM1 was commissioned not very long ago. ZAMREN, I will have more to say about ZAMREN. In a way, the most recent of those to do anything, but they are really moving. The party that enabled that was Bonnie Kunga and, of course, Liquid Telecom. So Bonnie Kunga negotiated with Liquid an STM1 into Johannesburg. It's extended from Johannesburg to Mtwanzini landing station using capacity on the SANREN backbone that TENET operates. And so ZAMREN is the first NREN to connect to UbuntuNET in Africa at an African hub with not having to find its own way all the way to Europe. And then TENET, long-established South African NREN, established in 2000. The connections into Europe that you saw, those green lines, total 14 gigabit per second. There are the details, and the peak traffic, 5.2 gigabits per second. To be honest, I have to admit that that number comes from the 2 weeks of the Olympic Games, and it's fallen below 5 again now. This is one of the things that NRENs do, establish light paths, unrouted, long-distance Ethernet handoff. This particular one shows you all the organizations and networks that the light path goes through from the Hart-Rau, that's the Hartbeespoort Radio Astronomy Observatory, about 70 kilometers west of Pretoria. There's an amazing dish there that was left by NASA in the 1980s and is now used as a radio telescope. And JIVE is the joint computing center where that telescope and many others in all parts of the world send data for processing and for generating the scientific results that come out. The project is called, there you see the name there, Very Long Baseline Interferometry. So telescopes all over the world are looking at the same radio source in the sky, and the tiny millisecond differences in the arrival times of signals, these are correlated together, and those times give an idea of where and how far away that radio source is. So that's been going on for a long time. Now a few slides about tomorrow's UbuntuNET, regional backbone. Regional means in Africa. This is about Xamarin. Xamarin, as I mentioned earlier, is the first NREN to do it on its own, create a border-crossing research and education network link. It goes into South Africa, and they're the details I mentioned earlier, riding on liquid capacity into Johannesburg, then riding on a layer 2 tunnel configured within the Xamarin backbone to the landing station at Mtunzini. And that's in service. So that's sort of step one. I'm presenting that as step one. Then phase one, you'll see that in the name on the next 3 slides. That's just phase one of the Africa Connect project, which I'll talk about after these 3 slides. So they're all headed phase one. This is the eastern part, eastern initiative within phase one of building this backbone. You can see a number of initiatives. Here are the towns. These blue lines here are what we call wet backbones. This is what we intend to happen, and the procurement processes are underway. So we intend to have a hop up there, as you can see, in Mtunzini, Maputo, Dar es Salaam, through Mombasa into terminating in Nairobi, and then to complete the ring and have some redundancy straight down from Nairobi to Mtunzini again. That's what we hope to have within a few months, and then a thinner circuit to connect our member at Khartoum, Sudren, the Sudanese NREN. So that's what we hope to have. Then a terrestrial component, a ring that connects from Nairobi into Kampala to connect the Ugandan NREN, into Kigali to connect UbuntuNET, the Rwandan NREN, and then closing the loop back to Dar es Salaam there. So we'll have that ring. So this is what we hope to achieve in this phase one. Here's the Western initiative we hope to achieve. Using capacity on the wax cable is a connection into our member at Kinshasa. They call themselves Ebale, that's the DRC's NREN, and then also to connect XNet, the Namibian NREN, first back here. What I'm not showing on this is the expressway circuits to Europe on wax as well that exist already. I showed on that earlier slide. So this is the Western initiative that we hope to have by the end of this year. And then this slide just sort of puts it together, what we hope to have by way of an inside Africa research and education network backbone. Let's say 12 months from now, we would hope to have that in place. Africa Connect is a project conceived and talked about for many years and now finally underway by the European Commission. The total value is 15 million euros, of which the African beneficiaries, that's us, must find 20%, 3 million euros. The Europeans are putting in the other 12. It's a 4-year project, and we're 1 year into underway already. The procurement and procurement phase is underway and will be followed by operational phase. So at the end of this year, the procurement will be done and we'll be then into an operational phase. The European Commission identified the UbuntuNET Alliance as its prime African partner, and so from day one, UbuntuNET will be responsible for operating the network that gets put down, and at the 4 years down the line, or 3 years now, at the end of this project, the assets will be handed over by the European Commission or by its agent in Europe to the UbuntuNET Alliance. So it's a wonderful project. There's the budget information that I mentioned earlier. Wonderful project. This is called phase one. So happily, the Europeans are talking about a phase two, and certainly we're also thinking about a phase two. Now come to UbuntuNET's interconnections. This is UbuntuNET's peering in Europe, just to give you an idea of the scale and the comparison of inbound, outbound. We peer at AM6, we peer at Links, and we have private peerings in London. You can see some numbers there, 1.4 gig inbound, 1.3 gig inbound in London, and about 2 gig private peering In London, the outbound figures in every case are a lot smaller, unsurprisingly. So that's the peering in London on behalf of our member NRENs. Commodity transit in Europe. In London, we're buying transit, and in Amsterdam, we're buying transit. We buy in the 95th percentile charging scheme and have 2 gigabit per second commits in each of London and Amsterdam. And here's a sort of indication of the ratio of transit traffic to the total traffic is about around 40%, and we would like to get that lower, but certainly not see it go higher. Within Africa, using this backbone, we want to peer everywhere. Open, settlement-free peering with IP networks wherever they are in Africa and of whatever kind. The NRENs that are peering so far, TENET peers at the Kenya Internet Exchange in Nairobi, TERNET peers at the Tanzanian Internet Exchange in Dar es Salaam, and TENET peers at the exchanges in Sinks and Jinx in Cape Town and Johannesburg. We will encourage every NREN that connects to do the same thing in its country and to make its peering arrangements available to the whole of UbuntuNET. That's what we want to do. So TENET is already negotiating that the peers, with each peer that we peer with at these 2 exchanges, that we don't use our own ASN, but we announce routes on behalf of UbuntuNET at UbuntuNET's request. And we want that model to get pervade throughout the UbuntuNET region. This just gives you an idea of the scale of TENET's peering in Jinx in Cape Town and Sinks in Cape Town, about 1.1 gigabit per second inbound, and a much smaller amount, as you can see, in Cape Town, and the outbound from us to the local internet, a lot smaller again. There's also private peering not shown here, private peering in South Africa. My last slide, Nuance is the name of the UbuntuNet's monthly news sheet. It can be downloaded from the website, and it's a very nice production. It's looked after by our Malawian friend and fellow founder, Margaret Ngwira, and her staff, and it's really worth having a look at Nuance. Get yourself either on the mailing list or pick it up off there. So thank you very much. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. So I really like that presentation because it shows how much opportunity there exists outside of the traditional commodity market of selling internet interconnections cross-border for the normal business. It means that the academic network is another potential area to look for interconnection or that can actually drive interconnection in Africa. Now, so we've reached a point where we've heard from the 3 panelists, and we want to invite questions from the floor. Anyone ready to or wanting to take the first shot at the panel with a question? Yes? Okay. We have 2 questions here. Can we have the mic?
I think this question is mainly for Ben. I think it's great that you guys have gone and put your own fiber up through Africa and probably growing your network. Has it been financially viable for you? The fact that no one else has done it, no one seems to be wanting to take the lead and take the plunge, other than yourselves?
Yes, it's been financially viable, yeah. It's good to have, we obviously had the support of a mobile network who needed a lot of capacity at the start, and that was a good start, but it's proving to be quite financially viable, yeah.
So was the mobile network environment the instigator of it, basically?
So the internet capacity we've seen explode, and in 2 years, let's say the internet capacity in Zimbabwe has gone up by 10 times what it was 2 years ago. So it's obviously the prices have come down too, but it's injected the internet capacity that was needed in the countries, and the growth is there. The growth was probably sharp at the very beginning. as latency came down, and the use of the internet was faster. But now the growth is really being throttled by the last mile. How quickly you can connect broadband customers, how quickly you can upgrade your 3G base stations. So that is now slowing down the growth, but that's the only thing holding it back. Not the capacity feeding not the pipe feeding the service.
Thanks.
Also, a quick one for Ben. How many more African countries are you planning to cover?
We have immediate thought. We have immediately 3 or 4 in our thought bank, really.
So we can expect to pick up transmission from you across more countries soon.
Yeah, I mean, the one that we're saying soon is DRC and Lubumbashi. Kinshasa and Lubumbashi won't be connected for some considerable time, I would say. But other countries are on the roadmap, and there's other opportunities as well where you can lease other people's fibres to connect into places onto our network. There's countries that can become available. Yeah.
My question, I'm Haitham. My question will be to Mr. Duncan. UbuntuNET is separated from Arab RIN network. Am I right?
I'm afraid I didn't hear the question.
UbuntuNET is separated or isolated from Arab University network.
It has no interconnection yet.
So do you have a plan to interconnect or?
We're looking at interconnecting either in Cairo or in Fujairah. So we're talking about it, but there is none now. Have I got the question right?
I think you are connected to Sudan. And Sudan is already in Arab region, Arab University network.
Yes, but so that's what I say. But between Khartoum and Cairo is a possibility. It's not there yet. But there's a possible interconnection between Khartoum and Cairo.
Okay.
But it doesn't exist yet.
Okay, but it can.
It can. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's an opportunity.
Yeah, it's
actually. Yes, no, we're talking about that.
Yeah, actually there are a terrestrial cable between Egypt and Sudan, and through Telecom there are another cable, and through Telecom Egypt is here. There are many cables between Egypt and Sudan. Yes, it will be easy to do that.
Khartoum is not yet connected to the UbuntuNET network,
so
it depends on that side of the thing happening as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Professor.
Maybe my question to Ben. We're talking about terrestrial. Do you see building a network from Johannesburg up to Nairobi being cheaper than doing the Telecom, the wet route, or is the terrestrial, the investment challenges of building the terrestrial cable, is that a much cheaper proposition than trying to build a cheaper connection between Mtunzini and Nairobi?
That's a good question. Building a network from our network to Nairobi wouldn't be viable, but there is extensive network across East Africa already through Kenya, Rwanda, and Tanzania. So opportunities to link those could be viable. Yeah.
Paulos, other point.
Thank you. I have a question on phase 1 of the, I don't know if you can bring up a slide of the combined phase 1 plan. Yeah. There are two links in the water. One is like completing the path. I wanted to find out why is it not possible to complete that link by going through the Blunter node so that you have one terrestrial and one in the water?
Yeah, I'm looking for something to point with. There we go. You would like to go up there? Yeah, so would we.
For the coming, yeah.
Yes, we'd love to do that, and I'm just waiting till the floor gets tired of asking questions before I ask Ben about this possibility. Yeah.
A question to Mr. Duncan. What is the major hurdles that facing you while implementing such a huge network?
Sorry, I'm afraid I didn't hear.
The major hurdles that facing you while implementing such a huge network in Africa, actually.
I'm afraid I still haven't heard. Could someone repeat the question for me, please?
The major hurdles.
What were the hardships?
The hurdles, yes, that facing you while implementing such a huge network inside Africa.
Sorry.
Again? Difficulties that facing you.
In South Africa?
In Africa.
Oh, the difficulties we face?
Yeah.
Well, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, in a way, is an attempt to sort of divide and conquer the difficulties. So phase 1 is characterized by an attempt to call major regional operators to do the whole job for us, as opposed to circuit by circuit calling independently for potential providers from A to B, and this A to B, and this A to B. So phase 1 is an attempt to reduce the complexity of operations by having one or maybe two providers do most of the work for us. And so in a way, what I'm answering is we're trying to pass the difficulties to owners of major capacity and their backhaul partners to do the job for us. And the gaps that you asked about, or somebody asked about this gap here, the gaps that you see here are simply are there because these large entities were unable to make an acceptable proposal there. I believe phase 2 will be a much more circuit by circuit, point by point, and looking for the best options there. Okay, so it's the difficulties that were talked about widely yesterday when you're dealing with powerful incumbents on either side of a border, and we are a peanut little organization. It's quite tough. That's one difficulty. Another difficulty is quite strange, that the actual procurement has been done by the Europeans. The company called Dante PLC that operates the Géant network and is based in Cambridge, England, they have been appointed as project managers for the Africa Connect project. And I think that potential suppliers, when they receive an RFP from a large European organization, then they're perhaps not so good at sharpening their pencils as they will be when a small organization is asking them in phase 2. So just that's personal though.
Hello, Silvio from Angola. To establish such network in each country, I think university need license from regulator. No?
Yes. Well, licensing is handled at national level, as you know, yeah. and so the establishing a cross-border link requires agreement between parties licensed on either side of the border. But generally, the NRENs that I showed there, the NRENs have the licenses. They have worked hard to persuade their national regulators to grant them licenses, including international gateway licenses. Incidentally, a factor, if I may mention, that didn't arise yesterday, is that some of these of the regulators have granted international gateway licenses, but they do not grant the right to the NREN to transit traffic that comes into the NREN's network at one border crossing and leaves it at another border crossing. So, for example, through Kenya, we need to transit traffic from Uganda. Through Uganda, we need to transit traffic from Rwanda on its way. See, so in some cases, the NRENs have got gateway licenses to import traffic and export traffic from their own network, but not to use their network to transit traffic from one jurisdiction across the country to another one.
That's very interesting. So gateway license does not mean transit license?
In some cases, yes.
Good morning. Anibunuche from Nigeria. When is phase 4 starting? That's for West Africa. Phase 4.
I'm afraid I didn't hear it either. Oh, phase 4. Yeah. I'll give you a contact that you can ask that question. West Africa seems to be much more challenged from the point of view of overcoming political ambition and issues. So to establish an NREN in a country is a difficult thing. If you put yourself in the shoes of the IT director of a big university, you paid, and your responsibility is to look after your university. And here's some character from UbuntuNET talking about working together and with other universities and putting together meetings. And everyone looks happy and talks and so on, but when the rubber hits the road, as they say, and you have to sign a contract, then you sign a contract with, on your own for your university with your preferred supplier. So it takes a lot of trust, and it takes an amazing deal. The NREN's got to come with an amazing deal so that the price does the talking as well as the wish to collaborate. So it's a tough thing to get an NREN going in a country. So in West Africa, there's GARNet, Ghana, there's NGREN of Nigeria, there's SNREN of Senegal, and these have been in existence as organizations for quite some time, but they still are battling to get support from the universities of their countries and to the point where they can actually build a network and start delivering services to the universities. It's quite difficult.
Hello, I'd like to direct this question to Duncan Martin. First of all, I'd just like to just express congratulations, because I think the UbuntuNET Alliance is a great initiative. My name is Gabriel from the Computer Society of Botswana. I'd like to ask a question more specific to the country. I saw in one of your slides that you said you were still in communications with the country to see how to set up a research network there. I just wanted to ask at what stage the negotiations were at, and perhaps who you were involved with, who you were speaking with in the country, because representing the society, the Computer Society of Botswana, I think that's a conversation that we'd also like to get involved in and push for it, because I can certainly say that my country invests quite a lot in research and education, and this is something that, in fact, I would have thought that at this meeting, my country should have been there. We should have had an NREN from Botswana. So who are you speaking with, and how do I get involved so that we, perhaps not even the next one, but we have an NREN set up as soon as possible?
Yeah, look, great stuff. I'd like to meet with you afterwards and exchange cards. I've not mentioned the CEO of UbuntuNET, an amazing man. His name is Frederick Francis Tusubira. Everybody calls him Tusu. He's a doctor of electrical engineering. He's almost as grey as I am. He has a long history of working with regulators in his own country, Uganda, and he's working as a consultant with the Botswana regulator as well. I, together with him, had a meeting with the Botswana regulator. This was about a year ago, attempting to persuade the regulator, who seemed to be persuaded, that the University of Botswana needed a special deal in order to get the NREN going. I mean, your main university needs to be the prime energy within the NREN. The person at the university we're dealing with is Moketsi Mpipi, I think is his name. Do you know him? Yeah, so I'd like to talk with you, and we can maybe make sure that at the next AfPIF there is a Botswana NREN to talk about. Thank you.
Okay, there was another hand on this side. Yes.
Thanks. My question is directed to Duncan. Duncan, I see you're being distracted there. Sorry, Duncan, I would just like to ask, can you maybe perhaps elaborate to the rest of the audience who may not understand why it is so important that other commercial networks peer with NRENs in settlement-free peering exchanges, and really what is the value that an NREN brings to the telecoms industry in the country?
Yeah. I think you could add a lot to what I'm going to say yourself, Christian. Christian is the project manager of the SANREN project in South Africa. This is a government finance project that has built an amazing backbone and that covers the 7 major cities of South Africa and has now been extended into remoter regions. TENET operates this backbone under contract to the CSIR that manages the SANREN project. So TENET has free access to this backbone, and that dramatically reduces the cost recovery prices that TENET must charge to the universities. So I think the major part of the answer is that the NREN in a country should be leading the way in enabling the universities to live with large bandwidth. Instead of producing generations of students, and I not only mean scientists and engineers, I mean students of all ilks, doctors, whatever, accountants. We want to produce students that are used to and demand adequate access to the internet for purposes of their work and of pursuing the interests of their employers, their companies, and their companies' customers and so on. Instead of producing generations of students that are skilled at hacking their way into getting a little bit more bandwidth out of a congested national network. So I think that is probably the primary advantage or value that an NREN delivers. It's in a couple of years' time. Today's students are people who know how to demand and run and use a well-configured and well-sized internet in their country. That, I think, is the main part of my answer, I'd like to say. But I think, Chair, you might ask Christian to tell me what's in his mind.
Sorry, Duncan, thanks. I didn't ask the question to get some airtime, but that's a welcome side product. I completely agree with you, but I also think that given enough internet, the kind of research and innovation that can happen at universities does seem to grow dramatically. And it's that kind of research and innovation and really this environment where learning is accelerated, where people come up with new industries and come up with novel solutions. And you find that your engineers are better engineers and your doctors are better doctors and your BA students are better politicians or what have you. So I think an NREN, whereas you grow a generation of people who are used to the internet and become true netizens and require it and thus go into industry and stimulate this further growth of the telecoms industry, you also just find that the general kind of intellect of the country rises faster than it would without an NREN. So that would be just one other thing I can add.
Thank you for
Chair, I can just mention one more, and that is the ability to participate in these huge data-intensive international scientific projects, like the Very Long Baseline Interferometry that I mentioned earlier at Hartebeest Hoek, like the Square Kilometre Array, without huge, or the possibility of huge interconnectivities within Africa, there would have been no question of South Africa, together with its neighboring country partners, winning the major part of that Square Kilometre Array bid.
So you have a point? Okay.
Again, my question to Ben, and I just wonder, do you see community networks like research and education networks as opportunities for you to build the terrestrial links? I'm still very concerned that Africa really doesn't have enough terrestrial capacity. And for us to connect to South Africa, we are having to get a circuit from SECOM or from EASY, and the pricing is kind of wrong. It's because it's for international rather than for regional interconnectivity. Do you see us, because one of the things we do as NRENs is we are traffic aggregators. So, we bring in all these national traffic for the higher education community. And the hope is that you shall become visible to an investor like you so that you can then build the difficult things.
There's a few types of different groups of people who want to build African networks across multiple countries. Mobile network operators are one, like Vodacom, MTN, things like that. They might want to link up a lot of their networks in their own countries, and NRENs are the same. So obviously we have already linked up ZAMREN and TENET, so it's an opportunity. But terrestrially as well, we're building networks in the country, so there's opportunities there, and we were talking about Botswana just now. I think that would be an opportunity for us as well. So definitely there are, yeah.
I think you spoke so softly I can't.
Did it work?
Do you want to go again? He says he did.
Is it working? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so what I basically said was it is an opportunity. It's gone off. Yeah, they are an opportunity. NRENs are an opportunity for us, and we've done an international link for ZAMREN and TENET to link them up together, ZAMREN and TENET. So, but domestically as well, there are opportunities, and if there becomes an academic network in Zimbabwe, for instance, then we would be the people that I'm sure they would come to first. But Botswana as well, if you're talking about that, then it would be an opportunity for us. Yeah.
Okay, any other question? Now, I had my own questions as well. I had sort of written, and I've seen most of them have come from the floor, which is quite good because it looks like we're thinking along the same line. One of the questions I had was, what are the main traffic drivers for cross-border interconnection in the region? And from the discussion, we've seen clearly NREN is one of the traffic drivers or cost for business or other opportunities for cross-border interconnection, and definitely for carriers. You've mentioned one of the things that also helped Liquid Telecom was the demand from the GSM. Are there any other areas that we're seeing to be very huge drivers in terms of driving the need for cross-border interconnection and the need thus for carriers and cross-border infrastructure to be well developed?
Yeah, the main other ones are voice of any kind. Whilst voice apparently is declining according to everybody, voice is quite high value. So although the bandwidth needed for voice isn't particularly price sensitive, the actual exchange of traffic of voice can be quite high value. And operators now are pushing for better and better quality, so they're wanting lower latency links. They don't want a satellite link to a switch in Frankfurt and then back to Africa. They want the lowest, cheaper, the best quality, crystal clear sound with short gaps. So international voice is an opportunity, and that's an important one. And also corporate networks. They are also less price sensitive, so it's not that we're pushing the price down, more and more capacity per meg. It's small offices who have a business in South Africa, and they have branches in a number of different countries to the north, and they want, as I said, it's less about price and quantity of bandwidth for them, it's about quality of service and grade of service. And they want SLAs, and you're only going to achieve SLAs by having loops and rings in your networks. You can't do it with a single fiber going across a border between 5 different service providers. It's not possible. So a single end-to-end network, SLAs, and good quality network, and people have great demand for that.
Martin Levy, you've been you've had this experience, and one of the traffic drivers that has come to mind, based on reports that I read not too long ago, was there's a cable being built from, I think it's from Europe to Hong Kong, and they're building a new cable because they believe with this new cable they're going to shave off a couple of milliseconds off this new terrestrial submarine cable that will be, sorry. I think it's going to take off about 7 or is it 10 to 15 milliseconds. And the main reason the cable is being built is because of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange building an entirely new cable just because of transactions of people in Europe trying to buy stocks in Hong Kong, and they will get a better performance with the new cable 15 milliseconds off. That's important for business.
Yes.
Is the stock exchange forex market a huge driver for cross-border interconnection, faster interconnection, in your opinion?
Well, I'll talk about the cable through Russia. In fact, actually, there's a whole bunch of cables that are being built with exactly the same exactly the same drivers between major financial markets, whether it be Frankfurt and London, whether it be London and New York and Hong Kong back into Europe. These are places where the trading partners are absolutely, they need to beat the speed of light in order to make money. And so the existing cable, which you can look up online, which is TEA, that goes essentially through Beijing, maybe through Mongolia, and then in through China, in through Russia, and finally out into Europe, either up through Stockholm or down into Frankfurt. They're looking, yes, so you can see that path, and you can see that you can optimize it. You can also build a second link for redundancy, because what we haven't really talked about is the different redundancy levels between undersea cables, which may have higher milliseconds due to having to go around land masses, versus terrestrial cable, which may have other issues, maybe more chance of being dug up, or maybe other issues. There is value in these cables, but the problem is that when you look at them for commodity internet versus for financial trading, and yes, there is financial trading that occurs with inside Africa back into stock market environments or trading environments, such as in Frankfurt or in London. The reality is that the commodity internet side starts looking a lot more price sensitive. And so building a shorter cable and maybe having a higher price on it is not conducive to internet providers to buy it. The particular cable you're talking about, which predominant path will take you Hong Kong into Europe, is a very expensive route. It's actually a very long route. It's actually comparable millisecond-wise with how much it takes to get from South Africa back to Europe. So you actually have to realize it's a very long distance, and distance does, price does have a function on distance. So for commodity side of things, commodity internet side of things, then it becomes probably less interesting, if the truth be known. But there are a bunch of other cables that are being built. Africa is not the only continent that has terrestrial cable builds. There are cable builds coming from the north of India over to Europe. Not an easy path to build. There is a cable being, well, there was a cable being built. There's a cable been built. It depends on who you speak to. That will go or goes from Turkey down through Syria, Lebanon, Saudi, and into the Red Sea, into the landing stations, Jeddah and the like. Obviously, that has Syria in the path, so that has a slight issue at the moment. But you can see examples of trading pushing the building of cables around the rest of the world. So maybe that will happen here. I want to answer one quick question: the benefits of NREN. The benefits of peering commodity internet to NRENs, between the two of us. The answer is heck yes, and immediately. If you're building an NREN and you're coming to a peering point, your ability to pitch as to why you should peer with other commodity internets should be very easy. NRENs are a very well collected, from the commodity internet side of the point, not the NREN to NREN communication, which is a separate issue. They in fact represent a good set of users that come well managed to an internet peering point, and for an internet backbone or for an internet any internet entity, especially a hosting entity, they become a very viable peer, and you will normally want to see, you normally can see that type of peering take place very quickly and very easily. It's also important for the NRENs to understand that writing an open peering policy is in their best interest, and most NRENs do that unless they really haven't thought about peering in general. So that was just a point from the previous question.
Okay. Duncan, Martin? You had
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
I'd just like to support that by remarking that ISPA, and that's the Internet Service Providers Association of South Africa, with the greatest of ease back in the year 2000, recognized TENET as a holy cow that should not be charged a membership fee. Mm-hmm. And these days we do pay port charges at Sinks and Jinks at our insistence, because we didn't want to ride on the backs, and we want, of course, to demand service levels as well. But we've had the greatest support from the Internet Service Providers Association from the beginning. There was no resentment at the fact that universities' traffic was being hogged and taken away from the commercial market, things like that. Mm.
Well, sorry, to hit that point, you're actually, in that conversation, talking about purely peering traffic, not the transit purchase. The universities still have a transit purchase, so the good news is there's still money on the table for the operators, right?
Not much.
Okay. You were meant to agree with me on that one. Oh, and by the way, I actually, to support the internet exchanges, yes. Everybody should always pay a port fee. That's, everybody should pay a port fee. That's one of those key points about internet exchanges. It's always a good
They're also non-profit as well, usually.
Yeah, usually so, yes.
Okay.
Back to the question about low latency cable systems.
Yes.
We've obviously got the lowest latency path between Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. And yeah, I can confirm that there is demand from major providers of financial data for the lowest paths. And there is obviously stock exchange just here, and there's stock exchanges and banks in those countries, and there is demand for that kind of low latency service.
Actually, there's actually one more thing which was not mentioned as another use for terrestrial cables, and that is as a redundant path, a backup path for undersea cables where appropriate, coming from a landing station inland terrestrially and back out to a landing station where it's appropriate for the purchaser of capacity to have that level of redundancy. This was used in the business case for building a terrestrial cable inside Central America, which would take you from Mexico all the way down to Panama, a collection of about 7 or 8 countries. That cable, whose name escapes me at the moment, which was done as very much as a wholesale cable actually, was predominantly done as an adjunct to a power interconnect cable system, transmission system that was used between all the countries to normalize power in the region. But there was undersea cable that I think would be very similar to what a SAT3 diagram would look like at the moment, where it jumped in and out of just about every country around Central America, and actually had, at the time, not now, but at the time, still was subject to the occasional cart fishing trawlers and the like close to land. The terrestrial cable was considered to be the most appropriate way to back up the undersea cable. It still touched every country on the way, and yet also its best customer was essentially the undersea cable, the operator and the customers of that, as opposed to country, but finding new customers. So there is a there is another use for terrestrial cables, which is nearly capable inside the diagrams that you've shown today.
I mean, South Africa's obviously got 4 systems, but there's a lot of countries that have got one landing point, one spur. Yeah, it's
Duncan, you wanted to start?
Yes, I'd like to, if I may, come to the question that I hinted at for Ben. There's a city called Blantyre. We'd like to be there. Would you like to be there?
Okay, so
potentially.
All right, I have my final question, which will pretty much make your closing remarks as we come to the end of this panel. And unless we have any other questions from the floor. Oh, Kevin, okay.
Yes, thanks. I have a question for Duncan. Do you know how much cheaper was it for Xamarin to connect to you as opposed to connecting to an ISP in Zambia for the internet capacity? And second, are you seeing traffic between universities in Xamarin and universities in TENET? Is there like cross-border peering between those universities? And lastly, overall for UbuntuNET, over and above the internet transit that you give, are you seeing a lot of traffic exchange between the different African entrants, even if it's in London? Are you seeing a lot of traffic between like KNET and TENET, for example?
Yeah. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to enlighten you very much. The Xamarin connection is very new still. And so the question of how much traffic between Xamarin and TENET universities, there has been no analysis of that yet, I'm afraid. I'm also not privy to the economic considerations that caused Bonnie Kunga to do what he did. But connecting to a commercial ISP would deny his universities a connection to the NRENs of the world, other than through their commodity peering by the NRENs. And so there was a strong urge, and there is a strong urge by these NRENs and the member universities to be part of this worldwide global research and education networking paradigm. So that would have been part of it. As to the analysis of traffic patterns, who's exchanging with who, let me undertake that 1 year hence at the next AfPIF I'll be able to report on that. We haven't done that sort of analysis. We haven't been analyzing flows to the extent that we should have, I expect. Thank you.
Okay, so Professor Melody? Okay.
Just for information, there is an operator in Kenya who has set up a circuit from Nairobi, terrestrial, to Djibouti through Ethiopia. Yeah. So the terrestrial links, and that was set up predominantly for what Martin is saying. It was mostly to provide restoration when we have been experiencing fiber cuts, undersea fiber cuts.
And just to add on that, the terrestrial is on a very volatile location in terms of security, but it was really required. So it's a place where you need security to actually fix anything and that kind of thing, but just tells you the demand for the restoration as a driver for cross-terrestrial infrastructure. All right, I think we'll like to close at this point, but before we close, closing remarks from the panel. And as you give your final closing remarks, my question is, what are the top locations you would like to build infrastructure to or peer into over the next 5 years? Starting with Martin Levy.
5 years in the internet world, that's an insanely long time.
Okay, fair enough.
5 weeks, 5 months, maybe. You know, that's no. Let's look at 5 years. In 5 years, I don't think you'll even recognize what's going on today. Okay. I think that the amount of interconnect, the place where active interconnects are in existence, even in places that we aren't even thinking about today, they will exist. The rest of the world has proven this. In 5 years, you can see a phenomenal change in the commercial side of the world as to who the major players are, who's winning, who's losing. That 5 years is a long time. So think big. That was not going to be my closing comment, but think big. And if you think that there is, if you look, let's just take terrestrial specifically. If you see a path where you can either drive or run a power cable or simply work out how to get between 2 points, it should be for any company or maybe even for a researcher worth the investigation. What does it take? You'll be surprised at, well, I should say I am surprised at some of the fiber paths that have shown up in the rest of the world. There is even a plan to build a cable, although this is not terrestrial, but if you can think of the map for a second, Japan to Alaska, up over the top of Alaska, and across the top of Canada and down through Greenland, past Greenland into England, and it actually reduces latency. It's an insane plan, but somebody put it on the books and said, what if? Now, it turns out financial drivers. It reduces latency from trading in Tokyo to trading in London, and that's got real money behind it. So in 5 years, you can put just about anything on the table that you think is impossible today, and the ones that really are doable, the ones that show financial viability, or show research projects that make sense, will be the ones that come to the top of the table. And as I said, the network in 5 years won't look anything like it does today, and that's a good thing. It'll be phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. My closing remark was going to be short and witty, and that is, go speak to your doctor, because your doctor will tell you that fiber is always good for the diet. So, I'm done.
Duncan, Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think UbuntuNet's major thrust, and it will probably still be underway 5 years from now, is to assist the countries whose NRENs are battling to get going. We need really to invest in that. As I mentioned earlier, it's a question of developing trust between independent universities and other organizations to the point. And so we and donors are going to help us and are helping us in this regard too. So I think that's number one. We need to get the NRENs functioning. Okay. Behind them, of course, are the campus networks. And each university needs to make sure its campus network can distribute the kind of bandwidth that an NREN can bring. At the regional level, we don't have a 5-year plan. We'll rely on the wisdom from our colleague here that things will happen. They'll be there. So our plan is much more immediate. Of the 13 members, and it should be when it's Angola and Botswana and so on, it should go up. We would like to have them all connected within 2 years from now. Have the UbuntuNet backbone reaching all of them. And then at the super regional level, I would like to see almost a seamless traffic flows between UbuntuNet, WACREN, and ASREN and the rest of the world. And we're working on sharing each other's agreements to share each other's capabilities. For example, in London and Amsterdam, UbuntuNet has a significant infrastructure. How mindless for WACREN to go and do the same thing. So we must make that infrastructure available to WACREN and encourage them to build infrastructure in the Americas, for example, and give us access to that. So those sort of initiatives are what we'll be spending our efforts on.
Thank you. You asked about places of interconnection and internet exchange points. At the moment, definitely Links, London Internet Exchange, is the INX of choice for Africa. There's more African members at Jinx, but Links has got more members from more different countries in Africa than any other INX in Africa. Mm-hmm. Some internet exchanges in Africa will become significant. Jinx will become more significant. Probably Kenya Internet Exchange will probably gain some traction, I think. And there's an opportunity for one in West Africa if that can be sorted out. And as to what's really driving the growth of this, the internet is, but it's mobile that's driven. It's GSM that's driven the growth of communications in Africa, the growth of voice communications, and with 3G and LTE, that will be what's continued going to drive the growth of the internet in Africa, and that's really what it is.
Excellent. So, thank you very much to my panelists. I think we should recognize their excellent contributions and presentations. Thank you very much. And also to you participants, I think the questions that came from the floor, you took all my questions and more. So thanks again to all of you for the contributions. And we'll take a coffee break, and we'll be back at 11:15, and we'll have the second keynote of the AfPIF panel. So see you back at 11:15. Thank you very much.